So on today's episode of Ninja Overthinks the Fuck Out of Everything, for starters, is have it's a whole lot. My mom's about to go into surgery. I hope everything's gonna be okay with that, and we're about to find out. But anyways, I have been reading because it's about the only other thing I can really do with my time, and I've came across something that was like really interesting. It's been rattling around in my brain, and I had to like kind of say something about it before it just went anywhere. And it's basically gotten to this point in this book about like let's see, changing prejudicial attitudes, and it is basically it was like just a portion of the book that was actually trying to offer like a solution. And I found it really interesting because we can all find it relatable in some shape, form, or fashion. Like we've all seen this, right? It says and it was something called the the social contact theory. And basically, under this, it was that first, the members of each group must have equal status, such as similar age or educational level. Second, they must have some kind of shared goal to complete together, and something that they can accomplish as a team. Third, there must be interaction amongst group members. Finally, there must be some authority supporting and guiding the process. And there was another interesting element, or another specific element that was missing from the original hypothesis, is that there also has to be like an outside force or authority that basically ensures that it stays in a positive notion, right? So basically, it's kind of like most people would be able to relate to this. It's something like marching band, clearly, or drum corps, or like, or any kind of sports for that matter, like any sports that are specifically held under a kind of a league. They all kind of produce the same kind of the similarities in situations where, like, people are able to break down prejudices between people because they're no longer being held to a preconceived notion, or so, stuff like that. And like, from what I understand, even when it comes to this area, like here where I live in Jacksonville, like part of it was part of what changed segregation around here was were intramural or interracial football teams. Like football was the first way that they broke through that method of segregation over here. It was the first reason why anyone even found a reason to like desegregate around here. And anybody who's been involved in any of these kind of activities have like seen the benefits of it and have experienced the same kind of things. You put a whole bunch of people in a room and you give them a very specific goal that everybody's going to find a way to do that, especially if everybody's on board. But it does take a whole lot of parameters to do that. But if you ever wanted to think about the one way, obviously we've like depicted this in so many other different ways too, about like we have two of the most unlikely strangers who end up in the craziest of situations, and now they have to find their way, and they found out that even through all their differences that they're pretty much just the same, and they're like the best of friends, right? That's pretty much this phenomenon in a nutshell. We've seen this like even out front, and like one of the things that this kind of teaches us is that we need to know so much more about ourselves, like, and about how we work and about how other people work, because the more we learn about ourselves, the more we're able to like relate that to other people and find out that we're like not so different, you and I, and it's hard to see that like how this isn't this kind of situation gone wrong, and when I say this, I mean like I essentially mean like this entire situation with the U.S. government and everything that's revolved around it. Like, is the fact that like we just imagine a whole bunch of people that had to figure out how to like run a government and create a government, and no idea exactly how to do that. And at first it actually worked out pretty well, and we thought we had a system that works, but as it goes along it turns out that it's not working at all, and it's crumbling upon itself. And you have two choices in the debate at this point: is to simply dismantle it and figure out something that does work using the community, or try to find a way to keep your power, essentially, to make sure that you don't lose whatever face that you have or whatever. So we're pretty good at like trying to sweep things under the rug as a society. And it's hard for me to not see our American government as literally that just a whole bunch of people that's let something snowball completely out of control and then had no idea how to change it, and then realized that there was no point in changing it because in some shape form of really in a really debauched fashion that it somehow still works. As long as there's sitting, somebody has to sit on top and someone has to sit on bottom, and there's no way to please everyone, and this is essentially the best way that we can do it. And the only thing it really fails to get is that it also, in the process of like trying to maintain this control, they're starting to dismantle like what humans are actually really about. Especially since that the best thing that we can do is work together. That is like 100% what humans are really good at. That is what makes us as a species very, very exceptional. That is what the things that we all have marveled at through ages, about the things that we've accomplished, all these things that we still to this day hold as this like spectacles of the earth. These are all things that like people have done whenever they are pushed towards a central goal, whenever everybody has the same idea. And that can be either really good, it can produce very positive effects, and it can also produce very devastating effects, obviously, that we've seen. And those are the things that we're generally so much more afraid of when it comes to like people and being together and all this other shit. So like, and I mean, it's essentially, I feel like, where we are now and why we have so many issues with like racism, division, and and politics, and ideology and all this other nonsense, is just because of the fact that they have kept this discord going for so long and have never sought to change it. It's like we did a wrongdoing or whatever or we've decided at one point that we were going to essentially, that this was going to be a white sovereign country, a white sovereign nation, because we just broke off from a place where we saw a whole bunch of like colored people and basically, we felt like the minority and felt like we were about to die out, and whatever reason it possibly was. It started out as something like that, and they initiated a system of control that was, at the time period, pretty foolproof. And then as we go along in our history, it turns out that we can't maintain this system of control at all. Like, it's starting to get really bad. We're starting to realize that we did something very, very, very wrong, but we don't know how to fix it, so we just keep it going. And then we realize that there's a way we can benefit from this discord if it remains the same. That means that we can still maintain a system of power and a system of control. It's like, gosh, we're losing that. We lose this social, we lose some of the more important elements in the social contact theory whenever you think about the fact that we're no longer working for ourselves and the community and the people that are next to you. No, we don't get to work as a team because we're too busy pouring literally every bit of our fucking time and effort into a machine, into a gigantic monster that just sucks up all of our fucking life force all the time. It's like, it's not. And at this point, you realize, like, to me, at this point, it doesn't seem like it's about money anymore. At this point, it's not about money. It's about people. It's about us. It's about keeping us in a certain place and keeping them in another place. Like, it's just, and the only thing that can really stop any of that is for us to work together. Like, we are not a people that need to be governed. Like, human beings, when we work in a community, do not need to be governed 100% of the time, because most of our day-to-day lives don't need that sort of governing. We have a community to maintain. You know what I mean? Everybody has needs. We all have basic needs. We all have, like, we all have to worry about our structural integrity and our infrastructure. Like, we have too many aspects of community that we ourselves can take on a daily basis that does not need the presence of, a central government presence. Like, there are other aspects that they could be utilizing. Like, there are other things they could be doing that could be pouring directly back into us, and instead it's going towards personal agenda. It's going towards selfishness. It's going towards greed. It's going towards, well, we realize that we can maintain this much control. How far can we go with this system? And We're like, and meanwhile, we're still sitting here living in the Matrix, thinking that we're somehow still working for ourselves and that this is still reality and that we're like, that racism is always just going to be a thing and people are always just going to be like, people are going to be people and there's always going to be discord and there's always going to be this nonsense. And it's like, but even though we have evidence that it doesn't have to be that way at all, like we have all of these things that we have experienced throughout our lives that tells us that things could actually be very much so different. But then we have so many unconscious things that we have just all been fed this entire time. Like we're distracted. And that's about the only thing, and that's the our irony, and is that's about the only thing you can really do to keep the Discord from going. So you keep us distracted. They turn, almost in a sense, our day-to-day lives is that sort of distraction. And, and it's, if you can unsee it, it makes it very hard to participate sometimes. Like, you know what I mean? There's a necessity to participating. The problem that makes it so gripping is the fact that, like, we feed the system by essentially like living. Like we've poured into, we've invested so much into it that we feel this need to have, or to just buy into it because it's made us comfortable for so long. And it's made us comfortable for so long, and yeah, it hurts other people, but we get, as long as it's not around us, it doesn't matter. We have all these issues that are going on in the nation with literally every goddamn thing. There's nothing that is actually really right. There are a few things that are right in moments, in spaces, under certain conditions, with particular type of instances. Like, I mean, like, the only time personally I ever really see the world being right is when I'm on tour, when I'm with marching band, when I'm watching bands, when I'm watching musicians, really, a group of musicians at that. It's like watching a group of people. That is one of the most basic goals I think a group of people could ever like work for. And I'd say basic as in like it's pretty simple. There's the music. It's self-explanatory in a way that is pretty much unexplainable. Like you just have to be there to experience it. Like maybe it'd be nice, maybe we'd start to see a massive change in our culture if we didn't spend so much time on this really strange secular education that basically is poured back into nothing about us. Like, it'd be nice to see, like, an emphasis on extracurricular activities, a more immersive sort of educational process where we get to learn more about ourselves than we get to learn about all of this other nonsense that has nothing to do with us. Or does have something to do with us, but very, very little, nowhere near as much as we actually may feel like or may need. Like we rewrite history almost every other year. It's insane. I don't know if anyone since high school has even looked at, like, unless you have a child in high school or something of the nature, like has even looked at a history book, and I always do, and it's hilarious and terrifying about how they portray some of the events that like some of the bigger events that have now happened in our nation's history, and how like the stuff that I've lived to see and like how it's actually being portrayed. So I can only imagine the people that were actually like fucking alive during the Trail of Tears reading a history book right now saying, oh, we agreed to move. Yeah, history actually says a whole lot differently. So what does that tell you about history? It is essentially a story that we tell ourselves, right? And history is important mainly because we have to learn from it. It's there for that reason and pretty much that reason only. Like, that is the only way, history is essentially the only way we actually can understand life as it happens, right? It's the only way we can essentially do that is through our memories. But what if our memories essentially are just a story that we tell ourselves? So which means that we actually need to start telling ourselves the right story. The truest story we could possibly get to. It would be great if, like, starting from, like, elementary school, literally from elementary school onward, that, like, we had a human development class and psychology classes, stuff to help us understand the human mind and how it works as we're growing. That's the most important part. As we're growing, even our psychology books, even this book that I've been reading dates back, half of its sources date back to 2004. And it's like, and most of these psychology books that you'll find will date back to information that is from the early 2000s and the late 90s, and it's like, and only a few of them are just new theories, and stuff like that. And essentially, not much is actually like we have chosen not to do a whole lot of exploration as far as our secular learning courses are concerned about like what we're doing as a culture. Like you have to be very specific. You have to very specifically find a course that will teach you these things. And I don't think that how it should be at all. We should be able to know, right, like what we're capable of doing and how we are as people and what happens to us when we grow, so we can make responsible decisions. That's what it's for. It's like, I mean, half the reason we run into mistakes is because of the fact that we want to know how it works. And that's what we also do as people. Like, we should be allowed, if like given the information that we would need to not make these sort of mistakes, like that would, I mean, that's a good step. That's a step in the right direction. That's a step in like solving literally every issue at once. Everything to like why we treat people the way we treat people, only to find out that we're exactly like each other. Like one person is not necessary. Like we're also vastly different in we're vastly different in some of the strangest and most subtle ways. But human beings are biological organisms, and we do have a set of behaviors and a set of biology that is similar between us. It's enough for us to understand and enough to relate, but we're not actually all that much different as people. And we only thing that like it's physically we have a whole lot of similarities and a lot of differences amongst that, but we're all still people nonetheless. We're all different. It's like we're no different than, to me, people are no different than other organisms on this planet. Like as far as a system of things are concerned. If you want, like, we look at an ant colony as kind of like something that is beneath us, but it works in a fashion that we have to as well. Where not every portion of this organism needs to be aware of what it's doing in order to essentially function. Like, we all just have to do what we do. We're doing what we're programmed to do. We're doing what we naturally are designed to do to continue this, to procreate, to essentially continue its survival. Like, that's just that's what our tenacity is for. But I figured if there was a point to this organism, or this organism is a part of, it's essentially through our perception and experience. Like, we're here to see it as it functions. Like, and that is probably the most important, and that may or may not be one of the more important aspects of it happening, because it turns out that every other it needs a system upon itself, but something needs to observe the system in order for it to make any sort of sense. And you can take that however you want to, or whatever. That's just a theory that, that's one of many possible things that could be out there as so take it or leave it as you are. But I feel like if you want to, I feel like we are actually not far off from the cure to all these all this nonsense that we've been seeing, all these issues that we're still wondering why we have issues about, where some people just aren't even aware that these are even issues. Like, all of this could essentially be solved with us learning about ourselves. I think that my hypothesis is that learning about ourselves is the cure to this. And, I don't know exactly how I will do my best to try to gather as much evidence for this theory as possible, and present it and I guess I really should approach this in a much more scientific manner. So actually, by the time I'll do anything of this nature again, I'll be much more presentable and not me having a full brain at 2:40 in the morning. But